Hello. I want to take a few moments today to talk a little bit about this idea of how we determine that a school is doing well. Really taking a closer look at Elliot Eisner's work, where he writes an essay that asks a question about how do we determine that a school is doing well? And the related question of how do we determine that the students are doing well? So I posed that question for us today. And basically, when schools are well, students are well, what does that look like? So we're looking at that and look using that lens of Elliot Eisner. So I want to start with this particular idea of just looking at some of the points that he makes in his chapter that addresses this or poses this question. He poses that in our current view of education, there is much rationalizing in terms of determining how objectives and measurements and being able to control how things are going to happen, downplaying how interaction of people, interaction of setting, interaction of background, all of the things, those variables, we try to downplay those interactions so that we can compare. We can have this thing called commensurability. And what we're doing is we're wanting to be able to compare one setting to another setting and have this way of scaling up what we do by providing some kind of common assessment, common rubric that applies to everyone. And those types of variables, including intrinsic incentives, such as a bonus for the principal who achieves a certain score, or bonuses for students who achieve a certain level, teachers who achieve a certain level, sort of like the business model of bonuses when achievements that have been predetermined are looked at. So there's a belief here, the image that I have on the screen, there's a belief that basically continues to perpetuate itself, saying that these are the skills you need, but if you don't get it, then these are the excuses or the reasons given, or how we say the student may be at fault, or the community may be at fault, or the culture may be at fault, the parents may be at fault, and that belief just continues to cycle. And so that rationalizing that if we could just give everybody the same thing, then we would actually have a better educational system. So trying to figure out how interaction with the world is at the heart of what Eisner here is pointing us to say we really need to look at the educational system, and how we're measuring A, B, C, D, F scores may not be telling for everything. So one of the items that Eisner poses is that if we just took away for 5 years, took away standardized testing and said, we're just going to look at what works. We're going to design the system, just release all of these concerns about standardized tests. Just what would we do? How would we look at education? How would we determine if a school is good? How would we determine that our students, that our children, that everyone who's in an educational system, whether it's college, university, elementary school, how would we determine that things are going well for the school and for the students? So Eisner poses a few questions that I actually still find quite relevant that we should be looking at today. He says, one, in that school and for that student, asking questions should be a habit. It should be lifelong. there should be an investigative perspective that that student has. There should be an investigative education that the teacher is stimulating in that student, that promotes problem solving, that promotes ownership of the question. It's personal. It's not one that is artificially made. It's one that addresses issues that reflect the interest of the student. That's one trait. Another trait is that the students learn or certainly become much better versed in the idea or the concept of using multiple perspectives to approach a situation, to approach a problem, to consider how they're going to deal with the world. So, 1950 American psychologist J.P. Guilford suggested a structure of intellect in which he identified 130 different kinds of cognitive processes. And so his acknowledgement that there are just so many ways that are that the cognitive measures can be considered. Now, of course, we know that they're under multiple intelligences um, and also in our term in terms of our levels of thinking, critical thinking, that we have affective domains as well as cognitive domains, but that we can talk about 130 different kinds of cognitive processes means that every student comes in with different strengths, different ways of looking at something, different ways of solving something. But unfortunately, we tend to favor the 5 to 10 or so that are most common, that we can more easily measure. But that doesn't mean that they're not the instinctive strengths of the students we encounter. And because we don't allow those to emerge, that we don't cultivate them, that limits, that's, that stifles the educational system. So the ability to raise telling questions, that's something that has to be fostered. It's not something that happens when a student turns or a person turns 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, 25 years old, 50 years old. There's nothing that says this just happens, but educators work diligently to create that space where multiple perspective taking occurs and this critical thinking, deep questioning occurs. That's another item that's suggested here. The other item, and so I just ask, look at your when you are teaching, when you are educating, when you're looking at yourself as a learner, when you are looking at children, when you're looking at students and adult students, how are they making connections with the material you provide in the classroom? How are they making connections? How are they transferring that learning to other situations? It doesn't matter what they can do, that you can test in a high stakes world or just in any type of testing environment. It doesn't matter that they can do it. What really matters, Eisner's pointing out here, is that what really matters is how they put it into real world practice, how they put it into looking at things in the digital world, which of course now we know is social media, the television, or however they're watching what's going on in the world, how they are applying their higher order questioning skills that they're learning in the topics we teach, in the environments we create. How are they transferring that to those situations? They need to make meaning, and then they need to make purpose. They need to make personal goals, things that they own. They have to make those personal goals match up to the meanings that they're making, the connections that they're making from what we're giving them in the classroom. And how are we making that part of the measurement of how they get a grade in the course? These are items that matter. Another item that Eisner brings up is this idea of a community of learners, and not just learners where everybody's coming up with personal goals, everyone's coming up with goals. It's much more specific. A community that goes about collaborating to make life better for everyone or for others, so that it's not just about I'm gaining, it's about everyone is gaining or someone else other than me is gaining. So this community of learners has a clear recognition that learning is about making a better community. It's not about collaborating so that I get better and that's all I care about. It's about collaborating so that the community is uplifted. So this picture just shows it's like the world, it's like the globe. You need all those pieces to come together to lift the world up. And so that's what I'm gathering when I'm looking at this Eisner article. The other thing is personal talents must be developed. Personal strengths must be identified as we need if we're going to do an assessment, it needs to be on who am I? Who am I? And then from that assessment, what's the area, where am I going to go? What's the pathway of where I want to go based on who I am? It tells me once I know who I am, I know my purpose in life. But I need to have actions that get me to where I want to be. So this fits really well under the hope theory that focuses on, does a person have a sense of pathway, as in what is the path I need to take for my life or for whatever desires I have? And then do I have agency so that I can get to where I want to be? So this is really the curriculum issue that Eisner is bringing to us, is that we spent so much time dealing with assessment so that the focus is on the subject matter when the focus should be on the student evolving into who they are purposed to be. And the subject matter simply helps them get a better proficiency with knowing who they are and then contributing in society. But developing that talent is critical. Then the student, there should be an element of self-assessment within that student looking at it, at his or her own work. So they should be able to look at how they're doing. Are they stuck somewhere? Do they need help? Are they going on the right track? Can they do that self-assessment? A teacher must embed something that says, I can see how you are progressing, and based on your own assessment. That's important. Even if I can't get to you, I need to know what you think you're doing well, because when I do get to you, then I know if you think you're stuck, you're on your way, or you think you've gotten it. Because now my feedback is different. If you tell me you're stuck and I see you're stuck, then we're okay. But if you've already finished the assignment or you're very close to finishing it and you still are saying, I don't know what I'm doing, then we have other issues we need to deal with so that we can build your confidence so that it matches up with what you're producing. But if you think you have it and you are in left field, you're in New York and you're supposed to be in Los Angeles, we probably need to talk a lot, because you think you're on the right side of the country and you're not. So we need to really get you on track because of that self-assessment. But it's helpful. The only way we know how we need to help you is when we see that self-assessment. So Eisner is very strong on this. One of my strongest beliefs is that self-assessment tells the teacher a great deal, and we don't do enough of it. It's called reflection, self-assessment, self-analysis, self-grading. Those are all things that are important. There's also this sense of locus of satisfaction. And students need some type of understanding of I like where I am. I like what I do. This is engaging. This is enjoyable. So, are they satisfied with their intellectual journey? So, Eisner says there are three reasons that we can look at to know if a student is satisfied or engaged with their learning. One, they like how it feels and who they are when they do whatever it is that they're doing. The other thing is that they like the results that they get. They like it. So I do this. I like it when this happens. I like the grade I got. I'm happy with that. I like getting A's. So I'm always going to do that. That's I like my A's. Or if it's a product that they're creating, I like when I make food because it makes me feel good to create something. Whatever it is that we're showing them, that we're engaging them in, if they like it, that's one reason. Another reason would be I enjoy the process of working to gain whatever it is that I'm gaining. So they're more into the process of I know when I put energy in, I know what the result will be. It's reliable. There's that connection of I do this, I gain this. And so that type of investment of time, that type of um, evaluation of if I put more in terms of time studying, in terms of working a problem, those are revision of work. I like the product that happens, but I know the process helps me get to the product. So what I enjoy is a process of giving to get, as opposed to labor that doesn't necessarily give me what I wanted. So that happens a lot when students just work a bunch of worksheets or they learn a lot of grammar rules, but they never really figure out how that information helps them be a better writer. They learn all the grammar rules, they learn all the parts of speech, they learn all of the steps, but they can't solve a problem. They can't write a sentence, they can't write a paragraph, they can't write an essay. So we want to help them put in the right kind of work to get to the satisfaction, the satisfying product that they want, as opposed to put in a lot of work, labor, and not be satisfied with the product. So that Eisner's really big on that, and that's an item we need to evaluate as teachers. The other thing that Eisner brings up is this idea of professional discourse, professional community. This must be a supporting mechanism for student learning. And often we forget about this. We just say, well, how's the student doing? How's the student feeling like they're engaged? Well, guess what? There's a book out there that says if you don't feed the teachers, they'll eat the students. So if you don't provide a professional community for the teachers, don't be shocked that the students don't have a sense of learning community as well. If the teachers are not asking questions, if the teachers are not uh, observing and collaborating about the learning that the students are doing, the students are not going to observe and learn what's happening in the subject matter the teacher is teaching. So there's a direct relationship here of what investment we're making to stimulate the questions and community and that sense of independence with the educator. There's a direct relationship here of how that transfers to what the students are encouraged to do. So if you hold on and lock in the educators, you're also going to hold on and lock the students into this sense of bondage for their learning. So the other really fascinating item is that Eisner points to a need to exhibit, to make clear the learning experience. As it needs to be considered like a journey. So there's a book called out there, Making Thinking Visible, and several iterations of it. But the idea is I cannot get into a student's mind. I can't get into an educator's mind. I can't unless I purposefully set some parameters so that the assignments tell me this is what you were thinking. This is what I liked about this paper. This is what I understood about why this step in working this math problem was critical. Why is it that this step matters? What did it move me to? So if I used to understand something a certain way, even if I've grown in my understanding of a concept, I used to think this, but now I think that. And just having a routine where students actually verbalize how they've changed, how they've grown, if they've looked or had a conversation with someone, how has that conversation changed them? This is what I used to think before I talked to this person about this topic. Now this is what I think after I've interviewed them. Having them make that explicit, that type of deep understanding of the meaning making that they're making as that they're putting together as thinkers is critical. So making that thinking clearer, where they slowing it down, so they stop and write it out or put it on a video, put it on an audio file, share their thinking with others. That exhibiting of learning must occur for the student so that they now understand how their learning process is going. But even more, it should be made clear that it's not just here's the product, here's the student, here's the teacher, this is the date they did it. That's just a product. But explaining how they went from one item to the second version of it, or the changing modification of it, the steps in between. It's important that parents get an understanding of the journey. It's important that community leaders get an understanding of the journey, because often people just think, just show me the product. But what needs to happen so that investors, so that parents invest in the time required for students to learn, that students invest in the time that it takes for them to learn. Once they understand it's going to take X number of steps, X number of products, X number of revisions, X number of steps in a math problem, and maybe even checking it to verify that it's working. And then real world checking on that product to see how it works out, plays out in the real world. They need to see that this is just part of the whole process of learning and contributing and building something to make the community better. So once it's seen as a journey, it makes a whole lot more sense when someone says, well, I want you to do this from day 1 to day 3. And then from at day 4, I want you to do this. It's not because I want to control everything, but I'm wanting you to have time to absorb what happens in days 1 through 3, and then absorb what happens in days 4 through 6. It will build on itself. It will come together. It will gel. But if you do it all in days 1 through 3, there are many items that you may miss because you didn't slow down the thinking process. You didn't slow down the documentation process. You didn't slow down and reflect on what you had learned from days 1 through 3 before you got to day 4, 5, and 6. So exhibit that learning experience. Allow the students to share where they are at a certain point, and then share how they got to the next point, and then look at it, reflect over it, think about it, and share it out. Make it a sharing experience for the student and for the community. Another item. So we're sort of looking at this idea that I've mentioned all of the items that Eisner mentioned that we should be looking at for a better system of education. But at the end of the day, he's asking us to basically not be as connected to standardized testing, to standardized objectives that often harm our students because it tries to create a box that everyone must fit in, even if their environments, even if their experiences, even if their strengths don't emerge in the box that we require them to be in. But Eisner's saying, I really suggest that you move away from this standardized cookie cutter approach and I'm privileging, I'm unabashedly just saying, I prefer improvisation. I prefer surprise. I prefer diversity. I prefer inclusion of what everyone brings as a strength. So, in determining how well schools are and how well students are doing, we cannot accept the current criteria that we have out there. It's not working. We need reform that is better than our current choices. We need a humane vision for our schools. And that will help us because that humane vision is going to determine what our children become and what our cultures become. Ultimately, who we become. We need to think about things differently.